Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Matt Radford came home after a long shift, all he wanted was peace. Instead, he found a massive billboard planted illegally on his land by a power-hungry HOA. What started as a trespass turned into a war for justice, land, and pride in the blazing heart of New Mexico. When I pulled onto my property that evening, the sun was just beginning to drop behind the low mesas that frame the New Mexico horizon like rusted teeth. The sky was bleeding orange and purple, and I remember thinking it was almost too pretty to be real. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the engineering firm, most of which had been spent mediating a ridiculous design dispute between two project managers who hated each other more than OSHA hates ladders. All I wanted was a cold beer, some silence, and to sit on my porch until the stars showed up. Instead, I got a billboard. It hit me the second my headlights swept over the crest of the hill near my front gate. There, right off the gravel path leading up to my house, stood an enormous two-faced advertising monstrosity, maybe 30 feet tall, backlit, cemented into the ground like it had always been there. The lights kicked in just as I slowed the truck, illuminating the words in fat, gleaming letters. Phase 2, Mesa Vista Homes. Only 3 lots left. Call now. Below it, in smaller type, the logo of the local HOA, Mesa Vista Trails Community Association. For a moment, I thought maybe I had driven onto someone else's land. Maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. But no. The fence posts were mine. The mailbox was mine. Even the gravel crunch sounded familiar under my tires. That billboard was planted smack in the middle of my 6-acre property, about 20 feet from the public road and dead center along my entry lane. I pulled up slowly, got out, and just stood there, staring. The thing was bolted into freshly poured concrete. Around its base, the dirt was still disturbed from the auger, chunks of sod, tire marks, torn up gravel. There were even leftover soda cans, zip ties, and part of a folding sawhorse tossed to the side like they'd barely bothered to clean up after themselves. I didn't need to be a surveyor to know it was on my land. I'd walked every inch of this plot when I bought it. The lot isn't fenced on the south side, but the GPS stakes are still in place. I pulled out my phone, opened the satellite map, and confirmed the pin. The damn thing wasn't just on my land, it was planted deep in it, 10 paces in from the easement line. I took photos from every angle, dropped pins, recorded a shaky video walking from the road to the base of the sign, narrating the whole way like I was documenting a crime scene, which technically I was. Then I called the sheriff's office. It took about 25 minutes for a cruiser to show up. A young deputy stepped out, looked about 12 years old with mirrored sunglasses and a fresh haircut that screamed, "First year on duty." He gave me the standard small-town greeting, a nod, a squint at the billboard, and a slow whistle. "Damn," he said. "That wasn't here yesterday." "Nope," I replied, handing him my ID and the property deed, and I didn't approve it. He walked a slow circle around the structure, then pulled out a tablet and started entering notes. "You say this is your land?" "Yep, I've got the survey lines marked. This billboard is at least 15 yards past the public easement." He checked the tablet, comparing coordinates. "Looks that way. You want to file a report?" "Absolutely." So we did. He photographed the site, took my statement, logged the time and date, and asked if I'd seen who put it up. "No, but I'm guessing it was the HOA from down the hill. That's their logo up there." "Did they contact you?" "Not a word. No letter, no call, nothing. I got home and boom, free real estate marketing right on my driveway." The deputy shook his head. "Never seen anything like it. You'll want to follow up with the county zoning office in the morning, see if they pulled permits. If not, you've got a solid case." I nodded, already opening the contact for Eddie, a demolition contractor I'd worked with before. He was fast, cheap, and most importantly, not afraid to get loud if the situation called for it. "Eddie," I said when he picked up, "how early can you and a bobcat be at my place tomorrow?" He laughed. "How illegal is it?" Billboard, HOA, my land. There was a pause. "We'll be there at 10. As the cruiser pulled away, I stood under the billboard a while longer, looking up at its slick vinyl face, the smug pastel houses smiling down at me. I imagined how many people had driven by in the past few hours and assumed I'd sold out, that I was part of whatever development was crawling over the valley. Not a damn chance. Tomorrow, I'd take back my dirt. By the time the morning sun started climbing over the ridge, casting long shadows across the low desert scrub, I was already dressed, caffeinated, and standing in my driveway with my arms crossed. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing that damn sign glowing like some kind of HOA monolith, humming with the audacity of people who think private property is just a suggestion. At exactly 10 o'clock, a battered flatbed rolled up my dirt road, kicking up a trail of dust that hung in the air like smoke. Eddie was at the wheel, one hand on a thermos, the other already waving. Behind the truck, strapped down and gleaming in the sunlight like an angel of righteous vengeance, was a compact orange mini excavator. Eddie brought two guys with him, Luis, who never spoke unless it was about torque ratios, and Javi, whose playlist of heavy metal and reggaeton was already thumping from a Bluetooth speaker tied to the cab. They got to work immediately. Luis started slicing through the base bolts with an angle grinder, sparks flying as if we were exorcising a demon. Javi grabbed a crowbar and started yanking the metal trim from the base. Eddie walked the perimeter with me, studying the soil. "Concrete's still green," he muttered. "They poured this less than 24 hours ago. Didn't even give it time to cure properly. Hacks. I want it gone. Clean cut. No trace. Say less." 15 minutes in, I heard the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel behind us. Fast, impatient, familiar. A white luxury SUV screeched to a halt near the gate, and out of it emerged a human embodiment of unearned confidence, Karen Tierney, president of the Mesa Vista Trails HOA. Beside her, trailing like a damp fart in khakis and a blazer, came Bob Jennings, her ever-loyal sidekick and former real estate agent who once tried to sell me a condo with no windows. Karen didn't waste time. "What the hell is going on here?" Eddie paused only long enough to pull down his safety goggles and nod in her general direction before going back to slicing through a support beam. I turned to greet her, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "Morning, Karen. Just doing some spring cleaning." "You can't do this," she shouted, striding across the gravel with Bob at her heels. "That structure is community property. It was authorized by the HOA board." "Interesting," I said, pulling a neatly folded paper from my back pocket, "because this is a copy of the police report I filed last night. And according to both this and county GIS data, that community property is sitting 10 paces into my private land." Bob squinted at the paper like it was written in Sumerian. Karen didn't even look. "That billboard is a vital part of our outreach campaign," she snapped. "We're entering phase 2 of development. Those signs were designed, funded, and installed by Mesa Vista Trails. You don't get to just destroy them because you don't like them." "You're right. I don't get to destroy community property, but this isn't community property. This is my land. There is no easement. There is no lease. There is no agreement. And unless you've got a notarized, signed document from me granting you permission, I suggest you get back in your SUV and call whoever gave you the bright idea to stake a 30-foot monument to entitlement on someone else's dirt." Bob stepped forward, holding up a tablet. "We have maps that show this is part of the shared corridor between the subdivision and County Route 16. And I have the deed to my property, which says otherwise." Karen crossed her arms. "I'll be filing a formal complaint with the county, and a civil claim, and probably a criminal one, too. You'll be hearing from our legal team." Eddie raised his voice from behind the excavator. "You want me to leave a piece standing so you can come pose in front of it for the lawsuit?" Karen ignored him. She turned and started taking pictures on her phone, each shutter click practically vibrating with passive-aggressive fury. Bob, meanwhile, paced nervously, muttering about needing to protect community messaging. I handed her a second copy of the report. "Here's the officer's name, badge number, my statement, my coordinates, GPS-tagged photos. If you want to take this to court, I hope you bring better documentation than your Magic Map app and an overinflated sense of self-importance." For a second, she looked like she might actually combust. Then she spun on her heel, barked at Bob to follow, and marched back to the SUV, slamming the door so hard the side mirror vibrated. Javi cranked the excavator. A few hydraulic winds later, the sign groaned and tilted, the steel supports wrenching free of their sockets with a satisfying metallic scream. It landed with a thud that shook the ground and sent a flock of birds scattering from the nearby mesquite. "Phase 2 is canceled," Eddie said, spitting into the dirt. I watched as they chopped it into manageable chunks and loaded the pieces onto the flatbed. Karen and Bob lingered in the car for a few minutes, probably waiting to see if the sheriff would come arrest me on the spot. He didn't. By noon, the billboard was gone. The earth leveled, the last of the scrap strapped down and ready for the dump. I handed Eddie an envelope and he handed me a cold Coke from his cooler. We toasted over the fresh patch of cleared ground, where the only remaining evidence was a shallow crater in the gravel and a few broken screws. "Feel better?" he asked. I smiled. "Not even close to done yet. I didn't even get a full day of peace after the sign came down." The next morning, just as I was finishing a call with the county zoning office to triple confirm that no permits had been filed by the HOA for any signage on my land, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail alert. Unknown number. I played it on speaker while brewing coffee. "Mr. Radford, this is Deputy Inspector Helen Granger from the County Development Compliance Division. We've received a complaint regarding unpermitted demolition activity on your property, as well as alleged damage to a community structure. We'd like to schedule an inspection this week to clarify the matter. Please call us back." I stared at the phone for a second, then took a long sip of coffee. Karen wasn't wasting time. That woman was moving faster than City Hall's fax machines, and that was saying something. I called back immediately and got Granger on the line. She sounded tired, polite, and very much like someone who hated being dragged into HOA drama. "I'd be happy to meet in person," I said. "I've already filed a police report and provided coordinates proving the billboard was on my land. I also have confirmation from the zoning office that no permits were filed." Granger hesitated. "Mr. Radford, I believe you. Honestly, this isn't the first time Mesa Vista Trails has blurred lines, let's say. But since they submitted a formal complaint and referenced a community development campaign, we have to investigate. Standard procedure." I sighed. "Fine. When?" She scheduled the inspection for Thursday afternoon. I made copies of every document I had: the deed, the land survey, my county parcel map, the GPS pins, the police report, the demolition invoice, even the email from zoning. I laid them out on my dining room table like a defense attorney preparing for trial. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. That evening, as I was grilling a burger on the patio, I heard tires on gravel again. This time, it was a silver Lexus. A woman stepped out I hadn't seen before. Business suit, clipboard, and the rigid posture of someone who eats HOA bylaws for breakfast. She introduced herself as Cheryl Brighton, legal counsel for the Mesa Vista Trails HOA. She didn't ask to come onto my porch. She just did. "Mr. Radford," she began, "I'm here on behalf of the Mesa Vista Trails Homeowners Association to formally notify you of a pending civil claim regarding damages caused to community property." I didn't bother hiding the smirk. "You're talking about the billboard?" "Yes, the promotional structure that was funded and approved as part of the HOA's Phase 2 initiative. Our records show that it was placed with landowner consent, and its destruction constitutes vandalism and property interference." "Your records are wrong," I said calmly. "The structure was installed without permission, on my land." I filed a police report. I have GPS-stamped evidence. I've also filed a complaint with the county development office. Cheryl clicked her pen, scribbled something on the clipboard, and flipped a page. "The HOA maintains that it acted within the parameters of its authority. In fact, we are in possession of a signed letter from the landowner approving temporary promotional use of the site." I paused. "You're saying there's a signed document from me?" She nodded once. I held her gaze. "Show it to me." "I'm not authorized to share confidential legal documents without a court process, Mr. Radford," she replied coolly. I leaned against the porch post. "Well, that's convenient, because I've never signed anything for the HOA. Not a letter, not a note, not a cocktail napkin." She blinked. "Then this will be an issue for the courts to determine." "I look forward to it," I said, walking past her toward the grill. "Make sure you bring that document." "I'll bring an expert in handwriting analysis." She gave me a stiff nod and returned to her car, heels clicking like gunshots on the gravel. I watched her drive away, burger smoke curling in the air. The next morning, an envelope arrived via certified mail. Inside, a court summons. The HOA was officially suing me for property damage, destruction of communal assets, and interference with marketing operations. Attached was a copy of the authorization letter, allegedly signed by me, dated 2 weeks earlier. It was laughable. The handwriting didn't even come close. The paper looked like something printed on a cheap office jet. There was no notary seal, just a squiggly signature that might have passed for mine if you closed one eye and used your imagination. The return address was listed as the HOA's office, not mine. I scanned everything, added it to the ever-growing evidence folder on my desktop, and called my lawyer. Her name was Nora Gilbert, and she answered the phone before the first ring finished. Tell me they didn't. They did, I said. Filed the suit and attached a forged letter. She let out a whistle. Time to go nuclear. Nora showed up on my doorstep less than 24 hours later, wearing jeans, boots, and a black blazer like she was headed into a bar fight where someone might also need to be sued. She was in her mid-30s, sharp as glass, and twice as fast. I'd worked with her once before when a contractor tried to charge me twice for the same foundation work. She had the guy folded like a cheap tent in small claims court inside of 10 minutes. I liked her immediately then. I liked her even more now. She didn't bother with small talk. She walked right past me, dropped her leather case on the dining room table, and motioned toward the growing mountain of evidence I had laid out. Property deeds, survey maps, GPS screenshots, the sheriff's report, the fake letter. This is good, she said, flipping through the copies. Very good. They're sloppy, relying on intimidation instead of legal standing. I nodded. Karen thinks she's bulletproof. She's HOA royalty, Nora said dryly. They always think they're bulletproof, until they're not. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing everything, organizing it chronologically, color-coding tabs, and building a bulletproof defense. Nora also made 2 calls that would end up shifting the game entirely. First, she contacted a forensic handwriting expert out of Santa Fe and scheduled a full signature analysis on the forged letter. She also had me sign a series of legal documents for comparison, under observation, with control samples. Second, she filed a formal counterclaim against the Mesa Vista Trails HOA for fraudulent misrepresentation, property trespass, and defamation. They've accused you of destroying something that was never theirs, she said. They forged a document, used it to justify commercial activity on private land, and are now trying to make you the villain. We're not just going to defend. We're going to bury them. By the following week, we had our first court hearing scheduled, a preliminary motion to dismiss their claim and admit evidence of forgery. It was set for a Monday morning. But the Friday before, something strange happened. I was out back clearing mesquite branches when I noticed a drone hovering overhead. Small, black, with blinking lights and a camera dome. It was just low enough that I could see the lens pivoting to follow me. I stared at it. It hovered. I picked up a rake and waved it menacingly. It shot up and zipped away, vanishing over the hill toward the Mesa Vista subdivision. That night, I installed 2 motion-triggered cameras on the fence post at the south edge of my property. If someone from the HOA thought they were going to play surveillance games, they were about to get some real footage. Sure enough, on Sunday morning, one of my cameras pinged me. I opened the feed on my phone and saw Bob Jennings himself parked just outside my gate. He stood near the edge of the property line, looking around, taking photos, and occasionally speaking into his phone. I watched him for nearly 10 minutes before he got back in his Lexus and drove off. I forwarded the footage to Nora, who simply replied, "Perfect. Let them keep digging." Monday came fast. The courthouse in our county isn't much to look at. Faded brick, half the windows fogged over with age. But it held the kind of power that made even the most arrogant HOA president sweat a little under their scarf collar blouse. Karen showed up in a pale lavender suit, a manila folder in hand, flanked by Cheryl Brighton and some junior associate who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They didn't acknowledge me or Nora when we entered. We didn't acknowledge them either. The hearing was short but tense. Cheryl tried to argue that the Billboard had been installed as part of a mutually beneficial neighborhood initiative, citing verbal understanding and informal permissions. Nora stood and, with the precision of a surgeon, eviscerated the entire argument. "Your Honor, my client has never signed, verbally agreed to, nor implied consent to any such installation. Attached to the plaintiff's case is a forged letter, allegedly signed by Mr. Radford. We are prepared to submit forensic analysis from a certified handwriting expert confirming the signature is not his. Furthermore, we have photographic and GPS evidence proving the structure was on private property. We are requesting dismissal of this claim and leave to proceed with our counterclaim." The judge, an older man with a face like sun-baked sandstone, looked over the documents for a long moment before speaking. "I will review the handwriting analysis before ruling on forgery. However, the location of the structure is not in dispute. It was clearly on Mr. Radford's land, without a recorded easement or lease agreement. The plaintiff's claim of shared use appears at this stage "To lack standing." Karen shifted uncomfortably. Cheryl tried to look unfazed. The junior associate actually sighed. The judge continued, "We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for formal review of the counterclaim. Until then, both parties are advised to avoid further direct contact or escalation." As we left the courthouse, Nora glanced at me. "They didn't expect a fight." I smiled. "They should have brought a bigger lawyer." The morning after our preliminary win in court, I woke up to the soothing sound of a backhoe somewhere it absolutely should not have been. At first, I thought I was dreaming. The kind of dream where you're back in high school and forgot to wear pants. But the low, mechanical hum grinding through the desert air was real, steady, and alarmingly close. I threw on jeans, grabbed my phone, and stepped out onto the porch. There it was. Another piece of heavy machinery, this time a bright yellow case loader, sat idling not more than 20 feet from the edge of my driveway. Next to it stood 2 workers in reflective vests, digging small holes and sticking in what looked like wooden stakes with pink survey flags. Beyond them, parked just outside the property line, stood a Mesa Vista Company truck. On the door, Community Development Team. And of course, standing beside it like she was overseeing the Hoover Dam project was Karen. She saw me, she waved, smiled. I didn't wave back. I walked over, barefoot and pissed, and stopped just before crossing the boundary line. "Want to explain what the hell you're doing?" Karen held up a clipboard like it was a holy relic, marking where the future utility lines might go. The board approved an exploratory survey of adjacent properties for potential infrastructure expansion. "Adjacent properties," I repeated slowly. "So, we're just skipping the part where this land isn't yours?" She didn't blink. "The HOA has reason to believe part of this boundary is misaligned. We're conducting preliminary checks. It's entirely legal." "It's not legal," I snapped. "You're on my land." One of the workers looked up, clearly confused. "This isn't part of the subdivision?" "No, it's not," I said, pulling out my phone and snapping photos. "And unless you want to end up in the same court file as your boss here, I'd suggest you shut down this operation. Right now." Karen stepped closer. "We've filed a petition with the county for a boundary review. It's being processed. Then wait for the dam review before showing up with survey flags and machinery." The workers backed off, muttering apologies and heading toward their truck. Karen stood her ground a moment longer before finally turning around and walking back across the line, heels crunching gravel like she was trying to leave dents in the earth. I called Nora immediately and sent her all the photos. Within an hour, she had filed an emergency injunction to stop any further infrastructure activity near my land until ownership lines were reaffirmed in court. That afternoon, she called with updates. "They're testing you," she said. "Pushing the line. Literally. Don't engage unless they cross it. We'll handle it from the bench." I was still fuming, but I listened. 2 days later, I got a call from Eddie. "You see the new flyer?" he asked. "What flyer?" He laughed bitterly. "Karen's HOA newsletter. It's got your name on it." Not flattering. He wasn't kidding. A neighbor from the edge of Mesa Vista slipped a rolled-up bulletin into my mailbox. Inside, on the second page, was a community safety advisory titled "Private Land, Public Risk, How One Neighbor Endangers Us All." It didn't name me directly, but it didn't have to. It described a non-participating property owner whose erratic behavior and hostility threatened the development and long-standing harmony of Mesa Vista. It also mentioned possible legal irregularities surrounding recent demolitions and implied I had refused to cooperate with lawful infrastructure improvements. It was libel thinly disguised in HOA language. I scanned the whole thing and sent it to Nora. "I'm adding defamation to the counterclaim," she replied. "Good. Add an extra 0 to the damages while you're at it." The thing about living on 6 acres of scrubland is that you hear everything. Wind hisses through the brush like it's trying to whisper secrets. Coyotes yip and screech like ghosts arguing over territory. And now, thanks to HOA sabotage tactics, I'd added the rhythmic beeping of motion alerts from my cameras to the nightly soundtrack. It started small, one alert around midnight, a blurry silhouette near the southern edge of the property. Then another, 2 nights later, from the west gate, someone walking up to the fence, pausing, then turning back. I couldn't see faces, just outlines and movements, but they weren't animals, and they weren't neighbors. The third time, I stayed up and waited. I parked my truck behind the barn, lights off, engine cold, sat in the dark with a thermos of coffee and the motion alert feed open on my phone. At 2:37 a.m., the south sensor pinged. I slipped out and moved slow, boots crunching gravel, the moon throwing faint light across the field. I saw him, a man in a hoodie, holding something metallic, looked like a crowbar or wrench, walking along the fence line. He didn't seem to notice me until I was about 10 yards away. I stepped into the open and said loudly, "Private property." He froze, then turned and bolted. I chased him for maybe 50 feet, but he was fast and clearly knew the terrain better than I'd expected. I didn't catch him, but I didn't need to. The cameras had. I filed another police report the next day. Trespassing, suspicious activity, possible intent to damage. The deputy who came out was the same one from the Billboard incident. He shook his head and said, "Looks like you got fans." Meanwhile, Nora was busy sharpening knives. The defamation claim was growing legs. She'd contacted 2 former Mesa Vista residents who'd left the HOA under pressure years back. Both were willing to submit statements about similar tactics. Newsletters used to smear non-conforming residents, subtle harassment, bogus petitions, and retaliatory fines. "I'm starting to think this isn't just a HOA," she said on the phone. "It's a damn cult with landscaping privileges." Things escalated even more when I received an envelope, not from the HOA, not from the court, but from the county tax assessor's office. According to the notice, someone had submitted a parcel boundary reassessment request. The form included a claim that part of my southern field might actually belong to Mesa Vista, citing historical alignment discrepancies. I almost laughed out loud. These people were trying to annex my dirt. I called the assessor's office immediately, explained the situation, and offered to send every document I had, including the original land plat, the GIS overlays, and the GPS footage. The woman on the phone was sympathetic and annoyed. "You'd be surprised how often this happens," she said. "Usually it's rich subdivisions trying to expand their buffer zones, but doing it without your consent? That's a first." Nora filed another motion, this time a cease and desist regarding title manipulation attempts. She attached the entire packet of forged authorization letters, drone footage, newsletter copies, and now the tax reassessment request. "They're trying to wear you down," she said, "push you into a mistake, but every step they take just gives us more ammo." And she was right. The more they pushed, the clearer it became that this wasn't about a billboard anymore. It was about power. Territory, control. They wanted me to kneel. I was already picking out a taller flag. It was supposed to be a quiet Thursday. I'd planned to spend the morning patching up a section of my fence that had been bent, probably by the same midnight visitor who thought sneaking around my property was a neighborhood pastime. But before I could even get the gate open, I heard tires on gravel and the unmistakable hum of an engine that didn't belong to anyone I knew. A white SUV pulled up just outside my drive. City plates. Clean, too clean for this part of New Mexico. Out stepped a woman in a tan blazer with a folder clutched tight against her chest, and a man in slacks who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Obama administration. "Matthew Radford?" the woman asked as she approached. I nodded, wiping sweat off my brow. "That depends on whether you're selling religion or lawsuits." "We're with the county zoning and code compliance office," she replied. "We received a formal complaint from the Mesa Vista Trails HOA regarding unauthorized structures and environmental violations on your parcel." I blinked. "Environmental violations?" The man spoke for the first time. "Specifically, an alleged illegal demolition of a community installation, failure to maintain erosion control, and unlicensed refuse disposal." I laughed. Right in their faces. "You mean the billboard they planted without a permit on land that isn't theirs? That one?" They glanced at each other. "I have documentation," I said. "Lots of it. Police reports, GIS data, court filings, you name it. You want to come inside? I'll show you what a real violation looks like." To their credit, they did. I walked them through every photo, every time-stamped file. I even played them drone footage of HOA contractors stomping over my sagebrush like they own the damn land. When I showed them the forged letter with the fake signature, the woman actually muttered, "Jesus." They left after 45 minutes, visibly irritated, not with me, but with the fact that they'd been dragged out here based on Karen's fantasy. Later that day, I got a text from Nora. "Guess who tried to get your land classified as a redevelopment zone to enable HOA annexation?" I stared at the screen, jaw locked, then called her. "She's trying to do what now?" "Filed a petition under a local community beautification initiative. It's buried in some subcommittee minutes, but I've pulled it." She used vague language about unused buffer space and unused land adjacent to development corridor. Classic bureaucratic sleight of hand. So they're trying to steal it through paperwork now? Exactly. But it opens the door to a much bigger counterstrike. That night, while reviewing more footage, I caught something else. A camera near the utility pole on my north end had recorded a HOA maintenance vehicle stopping for 5 minutes, then leaving. The next day, my water pressure tank, which ran off a private well, began behaving erratically. Sputtering, pressure drops, then nothing. When I checked the wellhead, I found a fresh scrape along the access cover. Someone had tampered with it. I called my pump technician, who confirmed it. Someone had partially opened the pressure tank valve and closed the return feed. Sabotage, plain and simple. This could have burst the whole system if it kept running dry, he said. Who the hell did you piss off? An entire HOA, I muttered. I sent photos and the repair report to Nora, who was already preparing for the next hearing. This is getting criminal, she said. Wasn't it always? By the time the second court date rolled around, I had a manila folder thick enough to kill a small animal. Nora, true to form, had triple-labeled it, cross-indexed it, and flagged it with more color-coded tabs than a high school debate team's prep binder. We weren't just ready, we were radioactive. Karen showed up late. She waltzed into the courtroom in another pastel suit, this time with a pale yellow scarf draped around her shoulders like she thought she was about to win a humanitarian award. Cheryl Brighton was with her again, shuffling papers and whispering frantically. The junior associate from before was nowhere in sight, probably smart enough to bail before the wreck hit the wall. The hearing was set to review both our counterclaims and the HOA's original lawsuit, which now looked as ridiculous as a raccoon filing a patent. The judge, same one as before, opened with the signature analysis results. The forensic expert concludes that the signature on the alleged permission letter does not match known samples from Mr. Radford. Inconsistencies in stroke pressure, angle, and character formation indicate a clear forgery. Karen didn't flinch. Cheryl asked to reserve objections for a future evidentiary hearing. The judge allowed it, barely. Then Nora dropped the next bomb. We've documented attempts to tamper with my client's private water system, likely connected to a suspicious visit from an HOA maintenance vehicle. We have footage, timestamps, and a technician's report. She handed over a glossy packet. The judge flipped through it slowly, face unreadable. Furthermore, she continued, we've uncovered an attempt by the HOA president to file for property reassignment and boundary reclassification under misleading redevelopment language. This was submitted without notifying the landowner and would have enabled partial annexation into HOA control. The courtroom was silent. Cheryl looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. Karen finally blinked. We are requesting that the court formally dismiss all claims against Mr. Radford with prejudice and allow our countersuit to proceed in full, including charges of fraud, defamation, attempted property theft, and intentional sabotage. The judge leaned back. He didn't smile, but I swear his eyelid twitched like he wanted to. This is quickly becoming a civil case with criminal implications, he said, placing the packet aside. I'm authorizing a full evidentiary hearing, subpoena of all HOA internal communications regarding this incident, and depositions from involved contractors. In the meantime, no representative of the HOA is to enter or approach Mr. Radford's property for any reason. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Cheryl scribbled something and shoved the notepad toward her, but it was too late. The moment was gone. Afterward, in the parking lot, Nora leaned against the side of my truck and took a deep breath. They're unraveling, she said. They didn't expect all of it to go public. Public? She nodded. There's a journalist in the courtroom. Freelance guy. He's been following HOA abuse stories for months. I didn't invite him, but I'm not mad he showed up. That night, the article went live. When the HOA overreaches, one man's stand against a suburban power grab. It didn't name me, but it quoted the court proceedings. The screenshots of the forged document, the drone footage, even the water tank photos, blurry but clear enough to tell something nasty was going on. The next morning, my inbox was flooded. Messages from locals, people thanking me. A few shared similar experiences, unauthorized property line shifts, harassment for not joining the HOA, fake citations. One guy claimed they bulldozed a row of his juniper trees and then billed him for landscaping. It wasn't just my war anymore. Things started moving fast after that hearing. It was like a dam had cracked. Subpoenas went out, depositions were scheduled, and suddenly every HOA board member who had once strutted around with smug impunity began tripping over themselves to lawyer up. Karen, however, still clung to her delusions of control, like a cat with its claws sunk into a collapsing curtain. I got a call from Eddie around noon the next day. "You might want to drive by the community clubhouse," he said. "Something's going down." I hopped in the truck and made the short drive over, keeping to the outer public roads. The Mesa Vista Clubhouse, a faux adobe monstrosity with stucco cracking under the weight of its own pretensions, was surrounded by parked cars and a cluster of animated voices. HOA members, residents, a few reporters with handheld mics and cheap tripods. On the bulletin board out front, someone had pinned a copy of the court transcript. The part where the judge declared the signature forged was highlighted in yellow. Another copy of the journalist's article was taped beside it, with the headline circled in red ink. And right in the middle of the crowd, standing like she still owned the place, was Karen. She was arguing with a younger couple, probably new residents, who didn't seem the least bit intimidated. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language said enough. Crossed arms, pointed fingers, head shaking. A man stepped forward and pulled out his phone. Karen swatted at it. Someone gasped. I drove off before the drama reached boiling point, but Eddie texted me later. "She shoved the guy. It's on video." HOA emergency meeting tonight. By sunset, word spread that Karen had been temporarily suspended as president pending investigation. Cheryl was acting president for now, but no one seemed eager to take the wheel of a sinking ship. Meanwhile, Nora had scheduled the depositions. The construction foreman who'd installed the billboard showed up first, clearly nervous but cooperative. "They gave me a packet," he said, recorded on video. "Said it had all the signatures. I didn't look too close. We were told to get it done in one day. The woman in charge, Karen, she handed everything off." Next came one of the HOA board members. He folded faster than wet cardboard. "She told us the owner had approved it," he said. I assumed she was telling the truth. We even got statements from 2 residents who admitted Karen had gone door to door spreading stories about me, saying I was unstable, hostile, and a threat to neighborhood values. One of them, an older woman with a guilty look, said, "I didn't know she forged anything. If I had, I'd never have supported this." By the end of the week, the court had everything. Fake documents, testimony, sabotage reports, legal maps, property data, harassment footage, and enough HOA drama to fill a season of bad cable television. But just when I thought it was nearly over, Nora called with an edge in her voice I didn't like. "Matt," she said, "Karen's lawyer just tried to negotiate a quiet settlement. They're offering to drop the HOA's claims and pay for the billboard removal if you agree to drop your countersuit." I let the silence hang there for a moment. "Did you laugh?" I asked. "Oh, honey," she said, "I did more than laugh. I told them we're not just going to win, we're going to make sure it sticks." Because at this point, it wasn't just about compensation, it was about precedent, about making damn sure they couldn't pull this on the next guy. And I had just the plan for that. The final hearing felt different. Not just because the courtroom was packed, though it was, with reporters, residents, even a few curious locals who had nothing to do with Mesa Vista, but had caught wind of the drama. But because the air had shifted, the tone, the momentum. It no longer felt like a defense. It felt like closure. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table alone, her once sunny wardrobe swapped for a conservative navy suit that didn't fool anyone. Cheryl was gone. Rumor had it she'd stepped down after receiving a letter from the state bar regarding her role in filing fraudulent documents. I didn't gloat. I didn't have to. The judge entered, shuffled through the stack of paperwork like he was flipping through a novel he was already bored of, and opened with the obvious. "Mr. Radford, Mississippi. Jacobs, your counterclaims are not only substantiated, they're overwhelming in their credibility. This court finds the original claims brought forth by the Mesa Vista Trails HOA not only baseless, but deliberately deceptive." He listed the counts like an auctioneer. Forgery of authorization documents, trespass and unauthorized construction, attempted misappropriation of land through zoning manipulation, defamation, tampering with private utilities, malicious abuse of legal process. Karen sat like a statue while each item landed like a gavel blow. The judge continued. This court awards Mr. Radford $210,000 in damages, including legal fees, compensatory restitution, and punitive damages. The HOA is ordered to formally retract all claims and issue a public written apology, to be published in the community newsletter and filed with the county clerk's office. He paused, then turned toward Karen directly. In addition, the court refers Ms. Karen Tierney to the district attorney's office for further review of criminal charges, including forgery, falsifying public records, and malicious intent to defraud. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. One reporter's pen stopped mid-scribble. Karen didn't even blink. The hearing ended without drama, just silence, the kind that sticks to your boots on the way out. Outside the courthouse, I stood in the parking lot while Nora lit a cigarette she'd been saving for 6 months. She didn't even smoke, but made an exception. "You just neutered an HOA," she said, exhaling. "You realize that? I didn't just do it for me." A few days later, a crew came out to finish removing what was left of the Billboard foundation. Concrete slabs dug out, rebar loaded onto a flatbed. The scar it left in the dirt would fade eventually, unlike the lawsuit. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned that deep orange that only New Mexico seems to manage, I hammered a short black sign into the dusty soil where the billboard used to stand. The letters were white, all caps, private land, no HOA. No advertising, no mercy. I stepped back and looked at it. The desert wind picked up, whistling through the brush like it was proud of me.